This will work this way. I'm calling to order this hearing or roundtable. This is a public roundtable of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson. I am Chair of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. The time is 9:35 in the morning. This hearing is being held in room 123 of the Johnny Wilson Building, although I believe 2 or 3 of the witnesses will be participating virtually, which always makes it a little bit of a challenge for the presiding officer, but it's great. The subject of this morning's roundtable is consideration of 2 resolutions. The first is PR 25-543, which is entitled District of Columbia Judicial Nomination Commission Marie John's Reappointment Resolution of 2023, which was introduced by me on Thursday, November 30th, 2023. The stated purpose of this resolution is to reappoint Marie Johns to the District of Columbia Judicial Nomination Commission for a 6-year term. That's what the statute provides. That will end on April 7th, 2029. Second resolution that is the subject of this morning's hearing is PR 25-581, entitled the Historic Preservation Review Board Marnique Heath Confirmation Resolution of 2024. This was introduced at the request of the mayor on Friday, December 22nd. Give me just a moment. I remember the holidays waiting for the nomination, which apparently had been submitted to the council on December 22nd, but we did not see it until January 2nd, which is of no consequence other than it's confusing to me. The purpose of this resolution is to confirm the reappointment of Ms. Marnique Heath to the Historic Preservation Review Board. This would be for a 3-year term to end July 21st, 2026. I'll say a little bit more about this. Ms. Heath and Ms. Johns have both been serving on their commissions. So these are reappointments. The first is by an appointment by the council. The second is an appointment by the mayor if confirmed by the council. And with regard to Ms. Heath, her term had expired July 21st, 2023. By law, she's allowed to hold over for 6 months. The council yesterday adopted legislation, temporary legislation, to allow her to hold over a little longer so that the committee could consider this nomination, which just came down, and move forward while the Ms. Heath is able to continue to serve in a holdover capacity. The record in this matter will close at 5 p.m. on Monday, January 22nd. 5 p.m. on Monday, January 22nd. So I'm going to take the Preservation Review Board first. We have 1 witness before we get to the nominee, Rebecca Miller, who is with the DC Preservation League. Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. My name is Rebecca Miller. I am the Executive Director of the DC Preservation League. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Let me start with DCPL's support of Marnique Heath's reappointment to the Historic Preservation Review Board. As a nearly monthly presenter before HPRB, DCPL has found Ms. Heath to be capable in her application of the implementing regulations of the Historic Landmark and Historic District Protection Act of 1978. She provides thoughtful feedback to presenters in both development review and landmark cases, and sound leadership to her fellow board members. As you know, Chairman, 2 sets of regulations govern the makeup of the HPRB, one at the federal level mandating specific professional qualifications be represented to allow participation in the National Register programs and qualify for federal grant money. and the other is the city level requiring representation of the composition of the adult population of the District of Columbia concerning race, sex, geographic distribution, and other demographic characteristics to be met with members who only need to have demonstrated interest in historic preservation. Currently, the 9-member HPRB has 4 vacancies, an archaeologist and 3 members, the archaeologist of which is required by federal law. Functioning with this statutory required minimum risks a lack of quorum at future meetings and has risked that in the past year. The professional vacancy held by an archaeologist has been vacant for nearly 14 months at this point. Notwithstanding these legal requirements and the important role that preservation plays in the economic development of our city, Mayor Bowser has allowed these vacancies to accumulate. She has also nominated individuals who have shown no prior interest in historic preservation and who do not come from all parts of the city. Statutory eligibility requirements. In addition to professional work related to preservation in fields of architecture or one of the other disciplines enumerated in the law, candidates could show interest by simply living in a historic district, enjoying historic walking tours, or acknowledging that the built environment is important to them. The board currently has no members from wards 1, 2, 4, 7, or 8, which together have more than 5,000 protected buildings. 3 of the 5 current members reside in Ward 3, the wealthiest ward in the city. This is not representative of the geographic or demographic makeup of the District of Columbia. Geographic diversity is vital for communities to feel that their views are considered when decisions are made about the properties in their neighborhoods. Thank you for the opportunity to present our comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have from you or the other committee members. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. With regard to this nominee, the Preservation League is in support.
We are, yes.
Do you have any word on what is going on with the other seats and nominations?
My understanding is that there have been interviews that have taken place with the Mayor's Office of Talent, but that is as far as I've heard at this point.
I did communicate with them last night because of this hearing today, but I don't have a response from them. My understanding is that they have 4 or 5 nominations that they're vetting, and I'm hopeful that they will get them to us shortly, because these vacancies have persisted for a while. And as you noted, the archaeologist is a required position, and that's been vacant for what, 14 months? That's
correct.
So the board risks, or rather, I should say the mayor, without these appointments, risks the financial funding that the Historic Preservation Office gets to the federal program.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't have any other questions for you. I appreciate your testimony. As you know, in the past, your testimony has been helpful in guiding this committee with regard to the executive and the appointments that it makes. So thank you. I'm going to excuse you, and I'm going to turn to the nominee, Marnique Heath.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson.
Good morning.
Members of the council. As you know, I am Marnique Heath, and I thank you for holding this hearing today. I also thank Mayor Bowser for nominating me for reappointment to the Historic Preservation Review Board and the council for expediting the consideration of my reappointment to this critical position. I am a resident of Ward 3 in Northwest DC and have been in the district as a resident for 24 years. I've been practicing architecture for 25 years and hold an architectural license in the district. I'm a principal in the Washington, D.C. Office of Studios Architecture, an international design firm specializing in workplace, civic and institutional, and mixed-use projects. I oversee an innovative design practice and a diverse client base at studios, including the district and federal government, law practices and financial firms, foreign entities, educational and nonprofit institutions, and many corporations. During my 25 years at studios, my practice has involved leadership on complex projects that integrate sustainability and historic preservation, including the recent renovation of Franklin Park, the renovation of the Bowen Building, and the redevelopment of the Washington Railway and Electric Company, or RECO, and Bond-Bread buildings as a new development for Howard University. In addition to my years of experience in leadership on historic preservation projects, I'm uniquely qualified to serve on the HPRB due to my years of experience on the Board of Zoning Adjustment, or BZA, in DC. I began my service as a member of the BZA in February of 2014, and from October of 2015 to September of 2016, which was the conclusion of my term, I served as chair of the BZA. During my time as board chair of the BZA, I experienced firsthand the importance of an open dialogue among all stakeholders to achieve practical and reasonable solutions that are in the best interest of the community and the district. I've found that experience highly valuable during my tenure as chair of HPRB. I've now served as chair of HPRB since January of 2017. And as a member of the board, my view on historic preservation has been focused on thoughtful interpretation of the historic preservation design guidelines while considering a project's practical and functional aspects. I've been proactive in helping to realign the board's sustainability guidelines to help reduce the district's reliance on fossil fuels while still being thoughtful about historic preservation. I've also focused on helping marginalized groups find better representation in our historic districts and landmarks. I'm also currently working with the Historic Preservation Office and the board to ensure that historic preservation supports the district's much needed goals for advancing affordable housing. In June of last year, I was elevated by the American Institute of Architects to the AIA College of Fellows, an honor that only 3% of our profession achieves in recognition of service to the profession and society. I was really pleased to have a number of preservation leaders and design professionals from across the country testify in support of my nomination for fellowship, based in large part, I'd say, on the work I've done during my tenure as chair of the HPRB. If confirmed, I look forward to continuing to work collaboratively with the Office of Planning, the Office of Historic Preservation, DC Preservation League, the Historical Society of DC, local ANCs, and other district stakeholders to advance the preservation, sustainability, and thoughtful development of our neighborhoods and communities. Mr. Chairman and council members, thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Heath. And what I'm going to do is ask you some questions, and then I will turn to the other nominee that we have.
Okay.
So I always ask these questions. I probably asked these of you the last time you were here. You're aware of how much time it takes to serve because you've been serving.
Yes.
Do you have that time to commit for the duration of this term, this new term?
I do. Yes.
Now you are a practicing architect and you do some work in the district. So I'm guessing that from time to time there might be a conflict of interest that presents itself. How do you handle that?
I have always recused myself in those instances. And so in those situations, I announce at the start of that hearing that I will be recused, as I do with other board members when those instances come up.
Do you, I know I asked this question of you in the pre-hearing questions, and thank you for your answers. Do you have any outstanding liability for taxes, fees, or other payments to the district or federal government?
I do not.
Ms. Heath, do you have any sense of what's going on with the vacancies on the board?
It's my understanding that there are several nominees or candidates being considered right now. And I was hopeful that my reappointment would be able to be expedited. So I thank you for that today, such that I would be able to continue serving. And then my understanding is now that that has happened, there is the next priority is with the additional members. I'm not sure who's being considered or what the timeline is, but my understanding is there are people being considered.
Okay, and I know it's not your responsibility. We had, in the hearing notice said that the record will close on the 22nd. I'm not sure that there will be a legislative meeting on the 23rd, although there will be a committee of the whole meeting. The legislation we adopted yesterday allows your holdover to continue for, I believe it's another 90 days, 45 days.
Okay.
So we'll probably act, assuming that there's not going to be a groundswell of witnesses. I'm looking around an empty room, who say that you're horrible. I expect that we'll mark this up on the 23rd and then present it to the council for a vote on the 6th of February.
Okay, that
So
sounds perfect.
let me just check, see if I have any other questions. I don't have any other questions for you. Thank you for your
Great.
service. Thank you for your willingness to continue serving.
Sure. Thank
that-
you.
With that, you're excused. I'm going to turn to the next witness and the next nominee. So thank you. Benjamin Wilson, signed to testify. Is he here? Almost on? Well, what is that? Almost mean? And Ms. Johns, you want to go to the table? Because I expect I'm going to be asking questions of both of you. And my understanding is Mr. Wilson is a member of the commission. And if that sounds intimidating, I don't mean it to be. That I have, that I have questions for the two of you. And don't shake in your boots. Mr. Wilson, good morning. And why don't you begin?
Good morning, Chair Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole. I'm Benjamin Wilson, and I'm very honored to give remarks today supporting the reappointment of the Honorable Marie C. Johns to the District of Columbia Judicial Nomination Commission, with whom I serve as Vice Chair. As you know, Ms. Johns has been recognized as a leader in business for more than 25 years now. She has been a tireless advocate for leveraging corporate resources for the greater community good and has received numerous business and civic awards. And that's understating it, over 100. Further, she has served on a number of boards, currently serving as a member of the Board of Trustees of Howard University and the Howard University Middle School of Mathematics and Science. Her commitment to using her knowledge and influence to advance the interests of the residents of the District of Columbia is unquestionable. I have known Ms. Johns for many years. However, it was in 2017 when we were both appointed to the Judicial Nomination Commission, Ms. Johns by the council and me by the mayor, that I began to experience Ms. Johns as a colleague and leader. Since her appointment, and under the then leadership of the Honorable Emmett G. Sullivan, the JNC has recommended to the President 12 candidates to fill 4 vacancies on the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. The Senate has confirmed 4 candidates to fill those vacancies. We have recommended 72 individuals to fill 24 vacancies on the Superior Court, and the Senate has confirmed candidates to fill 20 of those 24 vacancies. And since her appointment, our commission has designated chief judges to both the District of Columbia Court of Appeals and the District of Columbia Superior Court. As a colleague, Ms. Johns is always well prepared for our meetings and thoughtful in her deliberations. She often shares a perspective that reflects her understanding of the application process, her knowledge of an applicant's materials, and her willingness to reach a consensus. For these reasons, among many others, Ms. Johns was chosen to succeed Judge Sullivan as our chair at the end of his term on December 31st, 2022. Ms. Johns has served as the chair of the JNC since January of 2023. Her first act of leadership was to propose that the Commission expand its leadership model by instituting a vice chair position to govern that commission, and I am that vice chair. Ms. Johns has been and is an outstanding leader. Under her leadership, the JNC has sent 12 candidates to the president for his consideration in filling 4 vacancies on the Superior Court. The president nominated candidates to fill those vacancies. We are awaiting Senate confirmation votes on 2 of the nominees and hearings on the other 2. This past December, the JNC opened a vacancy on the Court of Appeals due to the recent elevation of Judge Lauren Ali Khan to the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. Pursuant to our statute, the Judicial Nomination Commission will send 3 candidates to the president within 60 days to fill that vacancy. Working alongside Ms. Johns this past year, I found her to continue to promote a collaborative environment of respect for one another's opinions and concerns. She always leads with conviction regarding our mandate to send the best qualified candidates to the president from a pool of candidates who apply for a vacancy on the courts. Further, she leads with a desire to maintain open communications with the White House and a willingness to engage with the legal community about the JNC application process. Her leadership, quite simply, is incomparable. In closing, I respectfully request that this committee reappoint the Honorable Marie C. Johns to the District of Columbia Judicial Nomination Commission without reservation. Thank you, and at an appropriate time, I'm willing to answer any questions you wish to raise.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I will have some questions for you in a second, but I want to hear from Ms. Johns first.
Pardon me. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and members of the committee. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to appear before you this morning. In light of my recent illness, I am most grateful for your understanding and flexibility in scheduling this morning's hearing. I would also like to acknowledge and thank Special Counsel Christian Washington for his patience, information, and guidance leading up to today. Mr. Chairman, as a result of your appointment, I have had the esteemed privilege of serving the residents of our great city as a member of the District of Columbia Judicial Nomination Commission, or JNC, since November 2017, where I joined under the chairmanship of the Honorable and legendary Emmett G. Sullivan. I would have never thought it possible to have the opportunity to serve our great city in this significant capacity. As a little girl growing up in segregated Indianapolis, Indiana, and the eldest daughter of a police officer, I developed a very early interest in matters related to our nation's court system. I recall my father talking about cases he was working on as he prepared for his own court appearances, and then discussing his views about how he felt things had gone. It was during these earliest memories that I began to develop a fascination and a deep appreciation for our nation's judiciary and the critically important role it plays for us all. In January 2023, I was honored by my colleagues to be voted JNC chair, and it is a role that I have approached with the guiding principles of mission, collaboration, and service. Along with my colleagues, we take seriously our responsibility to screen, select, and recommend to the President of the United States candidates for appointment to the Superior Court of the District of Columbia and the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, as well as appoint the chief judges for both courts. I proposed, and my fellow commission members agreed to my recommendation to create a vice chair position and my endorsement for Ben Wilson, a highly decorated member of the DC legal community, to serve in that capacity. And as a point of personal privilege, I'm very grateful for Ben's very generous testimony this morning, and it is a delight and privilege to serve alongside him and my other colleagues. In order to keep a smooth, seamless workflow, the JNC is ably served by outstanding staff members, our fantastic executive director, Attorney Tracy Nuttall, and Executive Assistant Cecilia Harper. On the DC Superior Court, currently there are 12 vacancies and 2 on the DC Court of Appeals. Of the 12 Superior Court vacancies, the JNC has recommended names to the White House for 9 of those vacancies over the past year. At the JNC, we have been focused on outreach to affinity bar groups and other similar organizations to educate the public about the JNC and its mission and encourage individuals to apply for judicial openings. Outreach activities this past year include the Judicial and Bar Conference in April, the Hispanic Bar Association Judicial Pipeline Panel, where Mr. Wilson, Ms. Nuttall, and I appeared in October, and the DC Bar Foundation in December of this year. It has been a singular honor and an awesome responsibility to serve as the JNC's chair. If I am given the opportunity to serve another term on the JNC in whatever capacity, I commit to you that I will continue to bring my energy, best judgment, leadership experience, and long history and love of community service to this undeniably important assignment. I will continue to do my part in ensuring that the citizens of the District of Columbia have a JNC that is efficient, timely, transparent, and operates at the highest levels of integrity. Thank you for your attention, and I'm available to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you. So I have several questions for you, Ms. Johns, and then questions for both of you. I don't usually do this, but this is a great opportunity for me to ask you a few questions about the commission. For you, Ms. Johns, and you probably heard me ask these questions of the other nominee. You've been on the commission, so you have a sense of how much time is required. Do you have the time and commitment to serve for the next 6 years?
I do.
Second question, I can't imagine that there's a conflict of interest, but if there were, how would you handle it?
I would recuse myself or take whatever other action would be called for in the circumstance. I've not encountered any conflict of interest
Have
up to this
you-
point.
In the time you've served, has any member had a conflict of interest?
Not that I recall, but I can certainly
No, you don't have
check the
to.
record and get back to you.
I can't imagine why, because you're just vetting appointments, or I mean, looking for, but then vetting appointments. The third question is, are you current in taxes and liabilities and how do I phrase that question? Do you have any outstanding liability for taxes, fees, or other payments to the district or the federal government?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So I do have a few questions that I would appreciate if both of you would answer. I'm going to start with this. As you may know, or maybe not, a month ago, the U.S. Attorney, United States Attorney, came to a meeting of the council. It was an informal meeting, and talked. And one of the issues he brought up was he feels that and there's a colleague here, Councilmember Parker, correct me if I've got this wrong. He seemed to feel that the bench at Superior Court is way too liberal and way too, well, not liberal, but too lenient about sentencing. And he actually, as I recall, named the Judicial Nomination Commission as a place that the council should look to with more scrutiny with regard to the judges that are nominated. Now, I don't want you to respond to that specifically, but to what extent does the commission consider ideology, that is tough sentencing or lenient sentencing? Let me kind of start with that question. Ms. Johns, and then Mr. Wilson, I'd like you to answer as well.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman, for that, for the question, and good to see you, Councilmember Parker. The short answer is that the commission does not delve into questions related to ideology or to ask a nominee to, for example, give an example of how they would rule in a particular instance. We do look at several dimensions of an applicant's qualifications. We look at temperament. How do we feel that person would serve on the bench in terms of, and based on their experience, based on information that has come in from individuals who are sending letters of support or expressing concern. We look at their writing skills. We look at their experience. And so we are aware that the U.S. Attorney has expressed certain views about certain decisions that have been coming from the courts. But we took the opportunity, Mr. Wilson, Ms. Nuttall and I, to meet with U.S. Attorney Graves and had a very good conversation. And we intend to keep that communication going because that is part of, I'll say, the leadership model that we have adopted. And that is, we think it's very important for the JNC to, as I said in my statement, operate from a basis of transparency, engagement, and to talk to individuals who may need to understand better what our role is and how we perform that role. And so I think it was, Mr. Wilson, I'm sure will have a view as well, but I felt it was a very good conversation. And again, one that we continue to maintain.
When did you have that meeting with the U.S. Attorney?
That was in December.
Interesting. Our meeting with him was December 6th. Mr. Wilson?
Our meeting was after December 6th, Mr. Mendelson, but I second the comments made by my colleague. We do not inquire into judicial philosophy, but we are focused on judicial temperament. And as you are aware, Mr. Chair, there's this picture of justice with a scale. And we don't try to put our hand on either side of that scale. Justice is blind. And what we want is we want people who are going to follow what the law requires and act with justice and compassion. And in the course of our interviews of these candidates, we try to get at the character of those who would serve our city. And we did very much appreciate the opportunity to meet with Mr. Graves, and we will meet with others and to get their views about justice in our city. And but again, our goal is to find the best possible candidate to serve the District of Columbia. People who live here, who work here, who care about the people who live and work in the District of Columbia. And I hope I'm answering your question.
No, you are, but I'm going to come back with a second question that's sort of related. First to Ms. Johns. So when the commission is meeting to discuss possible candidates, because as I understand, you put out notice that there's a vacant seat.
That's
Ask
correct.
for applicants, you get applicants. And I'm guessing that the staff screens, so when I, who's not a lawyer, apply, I may get kicked out by the executive director before I even get to you. But in any event, there are names who come to the commission. When they come to the commission, what are the discussions like? And I'm not trying to get details that you don't want to share, that you won't share, but what are the discussions like? I know that there's a former senior member of the U.S. Attorney's Office who's a member of the commission. There's a federal judge who's a member of the commission. Do the members of the commission, do you have debates over them that get into ideology? Ms. Johns?
Well, the beauty of the commission is, as you point out, it's a very diverse body. People who are practicing lawyers, people who are part of the judiciary, people like myself, lay members of the community. And it's through that diverse set of experiences that creates the opportunity for very robust discussions about candidates. The commission probes candidates about their background. The application, first and foremost, is quite extensive. I should have made note of this, but there are over 30 questions as part of the application process, along with other materials that applicants are required to provide. And it's through that robust application that commission members get quite a lot of information about applicants to begin with, particularly for when you look at people who are practicing law, what cases they are required to cite a number of cases and to talk about how those cases were executed and different facets of those cases. people who are coming. We also have applicants who come from other parts of the profession, from academia, from nonprofit service. So it's not just people who are either sitting judges as a magistrate judges, for example, or people who are practicing law in a more traditional sense in big law or in another type of firm. But again, people who are across the board in various ways to serve in a legal capacity. We meet with the individuals, then the commissioners have very spirited discussions about what we heard, how we interpret that information, and through that process, we eventually come to a decision about what names we intend to move forward to the White House.
How would you answer the question, Mr. Wilson?
Well, in addition to the great points made by our chair, let me start by saying that we neither appoint or nominate judges. What we do is we recommend 3 candidates from whom the president can, if she or he chooses one of those people, who then presents that person to the Senate, and then the Senate decides up or down whether or not that person becomes a judge of our court. I loved your question, though, Mr. Chair, because if I could just take a moment, among the people on our commission is Linda Kropp, who held the position that you held and who you know well as our council chair. You alluded to Vince Cohen, who was number 2 in our United States Attorney's Office. Indeed, I believe he actually led that office on an interim basis and chairs a major law firm. There's Addie Schmidt, terrific litigator in her own right. There's Judge Chutkan of our United States District Court for the District of Columbia. There's Yaida Ford, who has her own practice again in the District of Columbia, active practice. And then, of course, Ms. John. So we have, I think, a quite diverse group. The process begins first with those who choose to apply, but our efforts begin even before then. As Ms. Johns alluded to in her remarks, we work very hard to encourage people to apply. So that means we speak to various affinity groups, various bar associations, various federal government agencies, and we have applicants from academia, from big law, from smaller law firms, sole practitioners, from federal and state agencies. They come from all over, from the Public Defender Service and the United States Attorney's Office. And so we see them all. We meet with them, if they wish, in advance of our formal interview so that we might get to know them better. And we are in the process of doing that now. And then we actually have an interview and we talk about the candidates. We talk about their strengths and weaknesses. And one person may point out that a given candidate has not had experience doing landlord and tenant, and someone else will talk about that very same candidate's strengths. So we try to balance the strengths and the weaknesses of every candidate. We listen to each other, and I would like to think, Mr. Chair, that our and committee members, that our process is one where we listen and we try to understand what type of judge would this person be. We try to understand their why. Why is it do they want to be a judge of our court? What is their service gene? Where does this desire to serve come from? And as we discuss this among ourselves, we'd like to think that we arrive at a good decision, and one in which we send 3 strong candidates for every opening. And I would hasten to add one thing that Judge Sullivan did that Ms. Johns has continued. We uphold our end of the bargain. When an opening arises, Tracy Nuttall, our executive director, is on it immediately. When she commences that process, she communicates with the candidates, and We make certain that we have their information. She distributes the information of the candidates to us. We study it in advance of our meeting, and then we commence meeting with the candidates and speaking among ourselves. So it is a very thorough, a very thoughtful process. Members of the community can engage by sending in letters of support or letters of criticism of potential candidates. And we consider all of that, Mr. Chair, before arriving at our best judgment. I hope, again, we're answering your question, but please
No,
push
this
us
is
if
all
we are.
helpful. So, Ms. Johns, when the commission makes a decision, does it do it by consensus or is it a vote?
Generally, it's by consensus, pardon me, but there have been instances when we have taken votes.
How often is the commission split with regard to a nomination?
Seldom. Seldom. We continue to talk. As been mentioned, we have many of the commissioners take the opportunity to meet with applicants individually. So from that opportunity to engage with an applicant and then the communal experience of the formal interview, there's quite a lot of information to talk about for most of the candidates. And our process really has been, it's a wonderful experience. It's wonderful to experience it. And I, as a new person on the commission, after I was newly appointed, it was fascinating to see how through the discussion, through the conversation of each of the applicants, and then the applicants as a pool, various slices of conversation about the individuals before us, the consensus more times than not evolves.
And the focus is always primarily on temperament?
No, temperament is very important, but it's also, we have a strong focus on diversity. We also are focused on the technical prowess that each applicant brings, their writing skills, what their work experience has been. We're very focused on community engagement. We want to make sure that individuals who are going to be sitting on a court in our community understand the community, have not lived in a bubble, but understand the district and its people. So those are among the key considerations that we study and that we apply to our discussion about each applicant.
Before I turn to my colleague, to the extent that you can, how would you describe the meeting or conversation with the U.S. Attorney in December? I'm assuming that he said to you similar to what he said to us, that he thinks the judges are too lenient and would like to see, I'll just say judges are too lenient. How would you describe the conversation?
I thought it was very helpful. I thought that it was time well spent. Yes, the U.S. Attorney expressed views that he's expressed to the council and in other audiences. But the conversation was far ranging. He also talked about policy. He talked about his interest and willingness to continue the conversation and perhaps have other convenings to talk about many of the issues related to our city that has a multifactorial component. And he was very happy that we came in to have this initial discussion, as were we.
Mr. Wilson, how would you describe the meeting?
I would describe it as frank, direct discussions, cordial throughout, and one in which both sides agreed that we would look forward to continuing these conversations. And Mr. Mendelson and committee members, we need the rule of law in the District of Columbia now more than ever. We need people who are committed to service. I thought Ms. Johns stated beautifully the 7 or 8 major factors that we look at in evaluating a candidate. And ultimately, as you know, in any interview, one can never be 100% certain of what a candidate will do when put in the crucible of life, when tested. But we do our darndest to find out something about the fundamental character of the person. And I think that the citizens of the District of Columbia would be reassured to know that we have so many people who are committed to serving a community in which they live and where they have chosen to raise their families. And so we're very appreciative and humbled by the interest of those who wish to serve our community in this very special way as judges of our courts. And I would hasten to add that our continued efforts, led by our chair, Ms. Johns, and by our executive director, Ms. Nuttall, those efforts have yielded strong candidates and will continue to yield strong candidates. People need to believe in our legal system. We cannot make them believe. They will believe when they see justice, when they see fairness, when they appear before judges who care about them. Doesn't mean they necessarily get the result they want every time, but it does mean they can feel assured that they've been heard and they've been treated fairly. And these are principles that I think it's very evident to those who appear before us. They know that these things are important to us. And I believe that our judges demonstrate on a consistent basis.
Thank you. I'm going to have a couple more questions, but let me turn to my colleague, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good to see you again, Ms.
You
Johns.
as well, council member.
I'm going to start with high-level questions, and it's my understanding you're currently the chair of the commission. Is that accurate?
That's correct. I've been
and-
serving since January of 2023.
23. And how long is the term of chair? Is it an annual appointment or is it biannual?
Well, there is no term that's codified anywhere. My view is that it should be an annual review of who serves in that role.
Okay, and you're being renominated as a non-lawyer member of the commission. Can you distinguish the role of a non-lawyer member versus a lawyer member, or is that simply just a distinction based on background? Are there different responsibilities as a non-lawyer member versus someone that has a legal background?
No,
No.
all
Okay.
commissioners have the same responsibilities to the work. The difference is that the types of questions that people would tend to ask would be based on their background. My
Understood.
questions, Mr. Wilson will drill applicants on their briefing skills and their courtroom accommodations, et cetera. I'm more concerned about what people have done, quite frankly, outside of the profession, because I believe it's very important for all of us, no matter the profession, that we have to understand that our communities that we seek to serve from a variety of perspectives.
Understood.
So that's-
And how often is the commission coming together? Is it only when there is a nomination, or are you regularly meeting monthly, bi-monthly?
No, we do not have a regular meeting schedule. Primarily, we come together when there is a triggering event, a vacancy by some means on one of the courts. But we also come together when there is important information to share or to discuss. If there is something information we have learned that may give us a heads up about a potential vacancy that's ahead, things of that nature. So
Understood.
it's not a monthly meeting schedule, but we meet when there is an event related to a vacancy and also as necessary for other purposes.
And about vacancies, what discussions have been had about ongoing vacancies or past vacancies, both with congressional partners or the President of the United States?
But we have, actually early last year when we had a new leadership model and a new leadership team, Mr. Wilson, Ms. Nuttall, and I reached out to the White House Counsel's Office to have a courtesy meeting to introduce ourselves and also to talk about our concerns about the number of vacancies and to understand what more we might be able to do on our side of the fence to move that along. It was important that we signal to them that we're concerned about these
Mhm.
vacancies. We know that we're doing our part of the work in a timely fashion, and it's important to the citizens of the district to have a fully populated judiciary. So in addition to that, we also have have a regular contact with that office to stay in touch, to check in on scheduling or anticipated movement, et cetera, whatever information we can learn from that.
So
line of
am I
dialogue.
to understand that for each vacancy, you are sending 3 nominations?
That's correct.
Or are some of those nominations overlapped per the vacancy? So there may be,
Vacancy has 3.
each vacancy has 3.
That's correct.
Understood. Okay, so the issue with vacancies does not lie with the nomination commission.
That is correct.
All right, it is important for the public to understand that. Now I want to get to some of the more granular issues, some of which the chairman was getting at. Mr. Wilson, I'll come to you with this question. You mentioned the commission does not examine ideology or philosophy, but does consider temperament. I will say that I was a little surprised by that. And I would ask if you could elaborate. And by ideology and philosophy, what I'm interpreting that statement as is you're not examining one's political background, for instance, or how they view the world, but juxtaposing that statement with what we've heard from the U.S. attorney, which I'm paraphrasing, and I think the chairman did a good job. He's essentially saying part of the issue in our criminal justice system is that we have lenient judges that are not holding people accountable, that they are taking every opportunity to let the bad guy go. They are, if they have up to 6 months that they could charge someone, they are giving them time served and probation, for example. Can you elaborate what you mean by not examining ideology or philosophy with that ongoing criticism from the U.S. attorney that he would suggest that these judges' philosophy about criminal justice is the reason why we are seeing, in part, the violence perpetuating in the city?
I will. If I might, I wanted to clarify a couple other points. We were asked, please, when did we meet with the U.S. attorney? It was December 18th. And so I did want you to know that. Second, I wanted to re-emphasize that we neither nominate nor select a judge. We make a recommendation of 3 people to the president, and the president may choose one of those 3 to have taken up by the Senate for a vote. And so I do want to make that very clear. And we did remind the United States attorney of our role in that process. So we play a role. Second, your description is correct. We don't inquire into a candidate's politics, and that is not our issue. Third, I think that one can never be absolutely certain, even if we inquired as to how one might rule on a given criminal case, for example, how one might sentence. Each case is different. And quite frankly, I believe the citizens of the District of Columbia want judges who are not simply going to respond by rote, but respond based upon the facts and circumstances of a given case. And so we want to be fair, but
Mr. Wilson, if I can interject, sorry to interrupt.
Please do.
In terms of not examining ideology or philosophy, is that by code or is that the philosophy of the commission?
I believe that's the philosophy of the commission, and period. And
I'll tell you where my concern is. We are in a time where I think it is fair to say there is an increasing authoritarian view among many, including judges. And I'm a little shocked to hear that, oh, we don't interpret philosophy, but I can imagine someone can have the best schooling, go to the top law schools, can have great experiences, but if they were to say, I believe the president of the United States can commit any crime and should not be held accountable, that would be a huge red flag in terms of their philosophy that I would want to know, and I would not advance them. And so that's what I'm getting at in terms of consideration of philosophy and ideology.
So what I would say in response to that, I'm not certain that that type of position reflects a philosophy. Listen, judges are responsible for enforcing the law, for carrying out the law, right? And so if a judge says categorically in advance, I will not enforce that law, then they are not meeting that fundamental responsibility. And so our expectation is that judges will adhere to the law, because if they are selective in which laws they decide should apply or not apply, then they're going beyond that judicial function.
Understood.
And so listen, what we have in our community today, people are concerned about their public safety, and we share that concern. And I'm very confident that in our court system, and that justice will be done. And but it is important that we not throw out the law, the protections it provides, and the processes it demands, because then we are not a country of laws, but we are a country of passion. And there has to be a respect for the law by the judges who enforce it, by the people who are asked to abide by it, and by the prosecutors who are responsible for ensuring that people are brought to justice. And so everyone has a role. We have a role, but it's important that we not go beyond our role, which is primarily to identify the best possible candidates. And by the way, I want to hasten to add that law school is important, but it's not the only way that we measure candidates. We want to know what they have done with their lives prior to applying to become a judge. And so clearly, there is no single school or group of schools that one must attend to become a judge of our court. And we do want academic excellence, and we do want people who care about writing, but we are not bound to one place or one source for judges of our courts.
Thank you. I am over time. If I could ask one additional question, Ms. Johns. When there are different presidents in office, does your review of applicants shift at all? And if so, how? So right now we have President Biden in office. Prior to that, we had President Trump. Were there differences in how you're interpreting, or the commission interprets nominations to pass on to the president?
No.
No.
There's
Okay.
we do not change with whatever changes may be in the White House. Now, how the White House operates,
Understood. Yes.
unfortunately, we have no control over, but no, we do not change our processes.
Okay. Two additional questions. I did want to just circle back on the U.S. Attorney focus. And I want to be clear, because in my interpretation of our conversation with the U.S. Attorney was that he was, in some respects, passing blame to the commission for the judges that we have on the bench, which again, he suggested were being too lenient. And so, like, I don't want to ask you to conjecture, but how would you respond to a general criticism of too lenient judges on the bench in terms of your future review of applicants?
Well, I would suggest that people look at the names that are sent over to the White House. As I referenced earlier, applicants come from a wide variety of places, backgrounds, PDS lawyers, big law lawyers, people who've been in the Justice Department. Those are all people with those types of backgrounds are represented in the pool of people who have been sent forward. Because I also mentioned that the commission focuses on diversity in addition to temperament and other aspects. And diversity, we define that broadly, of course, racial diversity, gender diversity, but also diversity of experience, because we feel that's important to be reflected in the pool of candidates from which, the pool of recommended names from which the White House may select. So that would be my recommendation to someone. Take a look at what we've done and the background of the people whose names have been sent over. And I think they would find it's not all vanilla or strawberry. It's a list of diverse, highly qualified candidates whom we feel would serve the district ably.
Understood. I mean, to be fair, there was also suggested blame for the Sentencing Commission as well as the council and others. And I can talk about the reasons why I think that may be. But two last questions here. When you are considering applicants, I know you mentioned the members of the commission, and it seems to be a fairly small commission. Is there any external review of applicants that you all are doing? And if so, what's that process like? And by external review, are you seeking the chairman's perspective? Are you seeking other folk outside of the commission's opinion on the applicant? And if so, what does that process look like?
There are it's more of an individual process that members of the commission who would seek comment on a particular applicant from a particular quarter, that does happen. But what our process and our commitment to one another is that when we have those types of external discussions, is that information is shared with the full commission.
Understood. And I'll end with what I think is a softball question. What do you think you've brought to the commission, both as a member and chair?
Well, that's not a softball question, with all due respect, council member. But I, as I said in my opening statement, what I've tried to bring is my passion for this city, which is my home now. I came from on a bus from Indiana I wasn't born in the district, but it is my home, and I couldn't love this city any more than if I was born here. So I bring my love for the city, my commitment to service, which is long and varied, and I hope something that speaks for itself. And I also bring the skills that I've learned as someone who has run large organizations, small ones, started a small business, served in the federal service. I bring that experience to the work. And I also bring the experience of being a Black woman, mother of a Black son, grandmother of a Black son, someone who has a church home here and lives a full life in the district. And I think that's important as well. Just as I want to know that the people who are coming before us as applicants are bringing their whole selves to the role of being a judge, not just their law degree. I believe it's important for me to bring my whole self to my service as a commissioner on the JNC.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Wilson.
So I do have a few more questions also about the commission, but I'm going to shift focus here. I'm going to pick up a little bit. I know that Councilmember Parker touched on this. So we have these vacancies, and my recollection, it's roughly 20% of the Court of Appeals and roughly 20% of the Superior Court. Do you have any thoughts, either of you, on how we can get these vacancies filled? So I heard what you said in response to Councilmember Parker, and the statute requires that within 60 days, I think you start the process. So I'm not really asking whether you have a role in the vacancies as in you're moving too slowly, although you're welcome to address that. But is there anything that we can be doing, that the commission could be doing, or we could be doing that gets these vacancies filled?
Well, speaking as an individual, not on behalf of the commission, but I believe that it's something of an all hands on deck moment, and that certainly as our legislative body, that your concerns or views about the state of vacancies on our benches needs to be shared. The JNC is doing its part. We operate in a timely fashion. We handle our process within the time frame, and we believe we send stellar groups of nominees or candidates to be considered for nomination to the White House. Unfortunately, that's where our role ends. But I do believe that commenting to the White House, making it known the concern, because I live here. I want to see a fully staffed bench of judges on all of our courts. But I think that it's important for the White House to hear across the community that we need our judges to be nominated.
Mr. Wilson, would you add to that, or?
I would like to, very briefly, listen, this is of great urgency to our commission. We exist for the sole reason of ensuring that we do everything within our power to ensure we have a full complement of judges on our District of Columbia Court of Appeals and our District of Columbia Superior Court. Justice delayed is justice denied. And if we are down at 10, 15, 20%, whatever the number may be at a given time of judges in our courts, we're not going to be able to administer justice in a timely manner. Now, there was a question that was asked earlier about can the public comment? Absolutely. When we send out a notice, when Ms. Nuttall sends out a notice of a vacancy, one of the first things she says is members of the public are invited to comment on these candidates, pro and con. And so we welcome those comments and we consider them. And you were asking us about there are 8 different aspects that we look at in evaluating candidates, and judicial temperament, diversity are among those. We will share those 8 with you so that you have them. And then I would also hasten to add, we are proud of the nominees that we have submitted. We exercise our judgment to select those that we think are the best from the pool that are before us. We are not infallible, and nor are judges. But I think if someone is fair, they will find that our judges work enormously hard and to ensure that justice is obtained. They are tireless. Their efforts are consistent and overwhelmingly positive. So again, I cannot stress enough the work ethic of the judges that we have. And finally, Ms. Johns, like Judge Sullivan before her, has made very clear with the White House and elsewhere about the urgency of the needs of the people of the District of Columbia. You know, our president appropriately has appointments all across the country for which he has responsibility. We are not the only important part of America, but we don't want to be forgotten. And I promise you, no one is more steadfast in speaking up for us than Marie Johns. And where the council or others can communicate to Congress the urgency of our having our full complement of judges, it's appreciated. But we are going to speak up and we're going to act in a timely manner, irrespective of what others do, because our obligation is to the people of the District of Columbia. I hope we're answering your question.
Yes, Ms. Johns, so Mr. Wilson just mentioned 8 criteria or factors. Is that something written up that you can send
Yes,
us?
in fact, I have with me a copy of a press release that just went out yesterday. What is today? Yes, yesterday. It was released January 9th by our executive director addressing the issue of the recently announced vacancy on the Court of Appeals, the Honorable Lauren Ali Khan, who's moving to the federal courts. We have the list of all the individuals who've applied for the vacancy. And what we were delighted to learn is that, first of all, 19 applicants, and of those, 13 are new applicants, because often people apply multiple times for a vacancy. We have 13 people on this list who are applying for the first time. And that gives us some encouragement that our outreach efforts are bearing more fruit. And that's a very good thing, because the pool is very important. We cannot select a panel of 3 people to send to the White House other than from the pool that we have to work with. And that's why we take the work of going to panels, appearing on panels, meeting with other affinity groups, legal organizations, the various bar associations, because we want people to understand the process, to be thinking about applying when vacancies occur. To underscore what Ben was just saying, in this very press release, people are invited to comment by date certain, in this case, Tuesday, January 30th by 5 p.m. So what I took your comment, Councilmember Parker, perhaps too narrowly. Yes, everybody on the commission we have our own networks. And so there are individuals with whom I may hear from someone who has a comment about an applicant, or I may want to ask a question about, and knowing they have a relationship or work experience, et cetera. That type of information that happens organically among the commission members, because these are all people who have worked in the city, have long records of distinguished history in the city, so they have networks that they can tap into. But that information is the province of the full commission, because we share that information. But in terms of the general public, yes, we solicit their input, and it is an important part of the evaluation process to come to the list of recommended names.
Mr. Wilson, did you want to say something?
I do. The 8 factors are judicial temperament, professional skills and abilities, ethics, commitment to diversity is 4, leadership and communication skills, efficiency and organization skills, writing skills, and last but not least, community service. And we will share this list of factors that we look at, and I believe we've discussed most, if not all of them, with you today, so that you will have them. These are the 8 criteria that govern our examination, if you will, of the candidates that we see. And again, our chair is very modest, but we don't just get 13 candidates out of the blue. That's a result of the work that she and our executive director have done to help get the word out that we want good candidates. We want strong candidates. And I believe, quite frankly, a lot of this is attributable to our judges and the courts themselves. Our chief judges lead by example, and they also get out in the community. And people, again, I think want to emulate their dedication to service. That is the dedication of our chief judges and the other judges of our courts. And so we owe a lot to the quality of candidates to them as well.
And if I just
Actually,
could briefly add, the 8 dimensions, that the categories that Ben just ran through are part of the press release. In other words,
Yeah.
those are distributed to the public so that the public knows. That gets to the transparency I spoke of earlier. We want the public to understand how we go about making the decisions that we're charged to make.
And I see the 8, Mr. Washington is on the website, and so we see that on the website. So you don't need to send that to us. So I have another question for both of you. I don't know that this will take a lot of time. Ms. Nuttall is the executive director for both the Judicial Nomination Commission and the Commission on Judicial Abilities and Tenure. Am I correct about that?
No,
No,
the Judicial Nomination Commission.
just for the Judicial Nomination Commission. The reason why I asked was because my question has to do with budget, even though this isn't a budget hearing. As the chair of the council, I've become more active in reaching out to Congress about the appropriations, and your budget, I believe, is a congressional appropriation as opposed to in our own budget and our own locally adopted budget. I was looking last night. The challenge for me was that I didn't look beyond the summary numbers. The Congress appropriates for the two commissions. And my recollection is the appropriation, what is going through the House and Senate right now is somewhere above $600,000. And I think the request from the two commissions was somewhere above 800,000. To what extent is the JNC, the Judicial Nominations Commission, constrained? Because the budget that you've been given is not as much as you need.
Well, our 24 approved budget is 300,000 federal payment and 37,000 local funds.
Approved? I don't think it's in the
That-
local. budget.
According to, I may be mischaracterizing, but it's according to the information that I had at my hand. But be that as it may, the budget is in the range of 300,000.
And is it where you want it to
Better.
be?
Well, that's a dangerous question to ask.
Well, if you ask for
Me,
$1,300,000,
Of course,
you
we'll
won't get
take
it.
more. If we had more, we could do more outreach. I would love for us to be able to have money for interns, students to come and work with us and learn the process, as well as to add to the resources of the commission. So
Let me check here for a second. I
I'll
think I'm
pause
right. but
there.
Hold on. I think my memory is correct. But that doesn't mean anything. That the Judicial Nomination Commission and the Commission on Judicial Disabilities and Tenure.
Well, my answer is subject to check. I'll certainly get back to you if I
My
misspoke.
staff has confirmed it's federal money. It's
Yes.
not our local budget.
That's, yes, correct.
Yes,
The
so-
300,000 that I referenced is federal dollars. I'm sorry, I thought I said that.
Yes. And I know that Congress has yet to adopt a appropriation for FY '24. That's the fiscal year we're in. Yes, you all are going through the continuing resolution. Congress thinks we are, but we have a local budget. So the number I saw last night was that the request of the commissions plural was over 800,000. And that the amount that the House had approved and the Senate approved, both in the committees, not the full body, was north of or above 600,000. So that's a couple $100,000 less. What I'm taking from this is that the commission is getting by okay, but it could use its full request.
Yes. Absolutely.
I think I'll leave it at that. Councilmember, do you have any additional questions?
Very quickly, I want to come back to the philosophy and ideology question. And Ms. Johns, I'll direct this to you. So you mentioned that you're nominating 3 individuals. Am I to interpret that those 3 individuals, yes, they're all qualified,
We
they're all,
recommend 3
well,
individuals. for the
you're
president.
recommending, not nominating.
Yes.
Do those 3 individuals span philosophy? So maybe I'll put it this way. Is one like super liberal, one moderate, one super conservative, and the president gets to have their pick.
Goodness, I'm so sorry.
And maybe that's while you think about that, I'll ask two very pointed questions. We're at a time philosophically where a woman's right to have power over her reproductive rights is in question. I would want the nomination commission to weigh in and appoint judges that I believe reflect DC values. And so how would you interpret that? Are those type of legal questions a part of the 30 questions in the application process?
In terms of how an individual.
Like how a
would
judge
rule.
might rule. So when
No.
a Supreme Court nominee is before Congress, much of the hearing is, how would you rule in this scenario? They're interpreting the judge's philosophy to make a judgment about how they may rule in the future. And what I'm worried about, and I hadn't really thought about it before today's hearing, is what I'm hearing is that you all aren't really interpreting judges' philosophy or their view on the world, or are you, as part of the application?
Again, we do not probe on judicial philosophy. Questions are asked about how individuals feel about access to justice. We look so for example, if I saw someone an applicant who had a history, their community involvement related to longstanding work in a very conservative, widely known to be racist organization, they would not get my support, and I would argue vigorously against anyone supporting someone who presents that kind of a background, because that is not what the District of Columbia, what I believe the citizens would expect from someone to serve on the bench.
That is heartening to hear, and that totally makes sense. At any point during the interview process that the commission conducts of nominees, are you all asking judicial perspectives on various rulings or the law?
Yes.
You are.
Yes.
So
And-
at that point, you are interpreting judicial philosophy.
Well, part of the application, I forget that I didn't have it in front of me, asks applicants to cite of their body of work cases where they have been involved and to talk about the case in detail.
I got you.
The outcomes of the case. So it's through those discussions where a direct question may not be asked per se, but certainly
I see.
a view comes to the fore about how a person, may or may not respond in one situation or another. So
Understood.
that's why I cited the application earlier, because it is a very important part of, the information gathering for each applicant.
Understood. And I'll end with this, and I say this respectfully, and it's a request that I have no doubt you will be reappointed. You come with a great history, and as the chairman said earlier, unless something surprisingly happens and everyone comes out and says, no, I expect this reappointment will move forward, I would respectfully request that the commission entertain the idea of directly investigating judicial perspective, because the U.S. attorney is suggesting that it's having an impact. But I'm also worried on a more grander view, just in the time we are in historically, that's going to be really important. And I have no doubt that you all are doing your due diligence vetting candidates, but I just think it's going to be increasingly important that we ask more pointed questions around a judge's view of the law and who's afforded that law and who's not, whether it be the president, women, et cetera. So that would just be my request as you all go forward. And I really appreciate you taking time to answer these questions.
Thank you, Councilman.
So I'm going to engage my colleague for a moment in your presence on the record. So thinking about this, I think that what we want in terms of a judiciary is a judiciary that is moderate in its thinking. And I think the problem that we have right now, looking at hearings in Congress and the Senate with regard to judicial nominations, is that instead of looking for moderation, they're looking for ideology, and ideology that tends to be to the left or to the right. And I think that's problematic. I think that when not so explicitly, but implicitly, the approach towards selecting judges is looking for very competent people who are going to tend to be more moderate, but not the goal not being moderate, but rather being a good judicial temperament. You tend to get a result, which is judges who are going to be more interested in what the case is and the law than in the extremes of view. I think that's the challenge that we have had. The reason why I started this line of inquiry was because the U.S. Attorney, when he met with us, suggested that the Judicial Nominations Commission was responsible for a left bent judiciary that's interested in not sentencing anyone with any amount of time. And so my question was, to what extent is ideology playing out? The answer I heard was, it's not. And if you look at the members of the commission, a question in my mind going into this hearing was, is there the opportunity for commissioners, I'm thinking, for example, former acting U.S. attorney, for the commission to be having these ideological struggles and they're standing up and throwing chairs at each other? And the answer is no, they're looking for temperament and other factors that were mentioned. So I don't know to what extent that we want that ideology is a focus. I'm emphasizing that because then you get into this, well, we want more hanging judges, or we want more let them all go judges. And I don't think that's what we want. Yes, sir.
Well, I appreciate that. I would just say again, we are living in a time where there is an existential threat to democracy. And I think we do want to be pointed in one's philosophy and ideology around the rule of law and who it is afforded to and who it is not. And I would agree with you. The U.S. Attorney did suggest that we have two lenient of judges on the bench. And so I would argue that is the reason why we should be engaging one's philosophy. Do you believe in sentencing? What is your approach to sentencing? What is your approach on this ruling? If this ruling had come before you, how might you have ruled in this situation? In Ward 5, there's a individual that was recently charged with 18 violent robberies, 18, and a judge released them back onto the streets. And so I'm of the mind that that's a philosophy that we don't want on the bench. I'm not necessarily saying that's a part of the fault of the nomination commission, but I think by more pointed questioning, we may be able to raise up some concerns that may play out later down the line. So I think we're maybe in alignment more than not, but I just think we're living in a time where one's philosophy is playing out and how they rule, and it's a threat.
Anything you want to say in response?
I hear both of you, and I'm taking from both of your comments. I'm going to echo something that my colleague Ben said earlier. We take this work very seriously, and we know that we are in extraordinary times. That we carry that with us into this process. So as a commission, I think we have a responsibility. And what I will commit to you is that we have a responsibility to have a conversation about what we are hearing, this feedback from this experience, from our conversation with the U.S. Attorney and other quarters. And so that is what we shall do.
I think we've covered all the questions. Unless you want to spend another hour. We usually don't spend this much time with nominees. Mr. Wilson, thank you.
I feel special.
You are special. Thank you, Ms. Johns. As I indicated at the beginning, the record in this matter will be open for, well, we'll say the record will close at 5 p.m. on Monday, January 22nd. And that's if anybody wants to submit something that's included in the record. I want to thank you. I'll actually thank both of you for your service. And I want to thank you for your willingness, Ms. Johns, to re-up for the commission.
Well, thank you both for the opportunity, and I also want to thank my dear colleague for co-presenting this morning.
Thank you. All right, so the time is 11:05 a.m. and this roundtable is adjourned.